What's up, everybody? I'm Kevin.
And I'm Sergey.
Of the Tabletop Warlords, and we would like to welcome you again to another episode of Under the Tabletop, and where me and Sergey take a deep dive into the wargaming world, seeking out individuals to interview and gain insight for you, our viewers.
Today we're talking to Greg Horton, who is the editor and designer of Blaster Magazine, a publication that me and Kevin are huge fans of. Being the editor and designer of Blaster Magazine has Greg working with a myriad of talented individuals to produce an indie wargaming anthology. And without further ado, we welcome Greg Horton. Welcome, Greg.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Fantastic. Very good. Well, first and foremost, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, for any of our viewers who have never heard of Blaster Magazine, or maybe this is the first time they've heard about it, what is Blaster Magazine in your own words?
Yeah, so magazine is actually kind of a misnomer. It's really a book. It's really a book. It's an anthology, a collection of games. So there's, very nice. Yes, so that's volume 2. And what we do is we have 5 of some of the best indie designers out there, and they contribute content for their games in Blaster. So it's cover to cover game stuff. There's not a lot of filler at all. And in the last issue, we contributed a full game, and in the first issue or volume, we converted Gaslands into a space version of Gaslands, and it has everything you need to play it. So both Volume 1 and Volume 2 have full games. Volume 3 is going to have a full game. So when you buy a copy of Blaster, you're not buying a gaming magazine that just tosses in a scenario or two. It's a very robust book and gaming anthology. So that'd be how I describe it.
That's so cool.
Absolutely. So for people who haven't broken into it, who are all the designers that work with Blaster?
Okay, so we've got Sean Sutter, the creator of Relic Blade, Ash Barker, the creator of Gamma Wolves and Last Days, Zombie Apocalypse, and we've got Joseph McCullough, the creator of Frostgrave and Rangers of Shadowdeep, and Joey McGuire, the creator of This Is Not a Test, which is just this awesome game. And then Mike Hutchinson, the creator of Gaslands and Mystic Skies. And if you haven't played A Billion Suns yet, play A Billion Suns. So also A Billion Suns.
It's really a cool magazine. And if you're a fan of even one of those games, for the price that you're paying for a Blaster magazine,
oh, absolutely,
you would absolutely pay for an expansion to any of those games. Plus you get all this other content. So if you just play Gaslands, you're probably going to end up buying some Relic Blade miniatures after you break open one of the Blaster magazines. But how did you find yourself on the Blaster team? It's such a cool grouping of people.
Yeah, so I was on a phone call with Sean Sutter of Relic Blade, and I'm in in a grocery store parking lot, sitting there talking to him about how I'm having a hard time and these different things, and he's inviting me to participate, but I'm not hearing him say it. So he's saying if you go back and watch Sean's episode, he's a very reserved guy. So when he asks you to do something, it's in a very calm, even keel way. And he's yeah, I'm working with some pretty famous game designers on the magazine. And I'm cool, dude. That's great. That's cool. Yeah, we're looking for a graphic designer. Okay, cool. That's great. And that conversation ended there. I had no idea he was talking, inviting me to consider, becoming part of this thing. And then I Facebooked him later, wait, were you low-key inviting me to join this thing? Are you am I interested? Yes. He's yeah, I was totally inviting you. So that's how and at that time I didn't have a full picture of who was going to be in the room. Mm-hmm. So my first Zoom call, I'm absolutely shocked at who's in the room. I was I recognized every single one of them by face, name, game, and I didn't have really a clue what it was until I got into the room.
That's awesome.
That must have been like a moment you were holy crap.
Yes, it was definitely especially being away from conventions this long, you know, I definitely felt more starstruck than usual. Like, definitely was. I mean, I've respected all these guys for a long time, so it's just incredible to be on the call with them. Yeah,
that's definitely how we feel every time we have like one of these interviews. I'm like talking to like Joseph McCullough, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll do an interview," and I'm like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you're gonna do it?"
Now, as far as like the actual like functionality, so you had existed in kind of like, I would assume like the corporate world of like graphic design, and so, you know, going from that to, you know, working on Blaster, like how is that transition going from, you know, like the crisp and, you know, grayscale sometimes corporate world to, you know, depicting these sweet fantasy worlds that exist in wargaming?
Yeah, so it was actually, there's a lot more overlap than you think, and that's kind of what I'm coming to realize in the business that I'm starting. So like when I was working in the corporate world, I wasn't working on what we call, so I was working in creative services at a creative agency, and we work with multiple corporations to create things. So I wasn't on the client side where it was like very strict in corporate. I was in the cool kind of renegade corporate companies hire us to do crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. So a lot of brand identity, website, marketing, planning, production, and I had gotten my start in the low level and worked my way up to the top. So I have kind of like a start to finish production line understanding of the whole process. So when Blaster invited me to participate, one of the first things we did was just talk about brand for a little bit and hear a little bit about their what their goals for this magazine was. And it very much started out like toss some scenarios in there. Maybe we'll have some crossover with our team between our games. But it turned out that basically after some digging, we realized we wanted to create something bold and crazy. Mm-hmm. We wanted to create something that hasn't really been seen before. We wanted to collaborate on a level that people haven't seen before. We wanted to do something that you had to have in your hand, like that you couldn't just accept was just a PDF and that's fine. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to be slow and make sure that it's awesome. So those things were in conflict with our original idea. So we slowed down and rebuilt the whole thing around this concept of this trusty magazine that we need to have by us at all times. And that's where we came up with the name Blasters. It's like a gun ready.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's also bold, like the whole, you know, picture that we have done. So those sorts of ideas come across the table all the time, and games are kind of like self-taught design, self-taught marketing, self-taught web design, self-taught user experience, and all these different things. So bringing the like professional level of each of those different skill sets to the gaming community, and in this case, it was to the, you know, talking about marketing with Sean is so good for both of us. Like I hear on a very micro scale, so to speak, of like, how do you build a business? How do you like get that initial momentum going and do that? And then he gets to hear how to like collaborate and expand and put fire on the gasoline to like explode stuff out. So it's been fun to like both rub off on each other across each of those designers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Blaster, like, it has as a visual aid, it has like a really unique look. Like it looks much more polished than like your average wargaming book does. It feels like an indie video game, if that makes sense. Yeah. Which is
and in
really
your words,
awesome.
It's very bold. It's a very bold setup too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is absolutely fantastic. So what was it like working with such a diverse team and having like, I'm sure you had like hundreds of thousands of ideas all boiling about in the cauldron. Like, how do you actually bring all of that together and make something awesome like Blaster?
Yeah, so I think I kind of conflated those two questions a little bit. So I'm going to go back a little bit to like, when we take those designers and put them in a room, we have to kind of align around a core idea. And like for us, that core idea was, you know, we kind of like tossed out this idea of the tutu bear, the magic card bear. It's like Grizzly Bear is a 2/2 green creature for 2 mana, and we were like, we love Magic, we love that like card is just iconic, but that's not what we want to be. We don't want to just be a 2 mana flavorless, like it's a bear, like it's a bear in Magic. We wanted to do something that was provocative and interesting and weird. So our ideas started to coalesce around that. So Mike Hutchinson's jumping in with, hey dude, I had a weird idea. What if we make a flying carpet combat game?
Which is so cool.
Yeah, best idea throw out ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's exact. Some of the stuff that Sean has been talking about for future volumes is like just the freedom that they get from being able to go, oh hey, this isn't like my mainline, stuff. It's still within their in the scope of their worlds, but it's weird. It's like they're taking risks. So risk was aligning around risk, aligning around the crazy, aligning around collaboration between each other. So that collaboration between Sean and Mike on volume 2 for Mystic Skies, all of that is the core and center of that idea. So it becomes very easy. They start to come up with crazy things, and watching, some of the stuff come up for volume 4 is really cool to watch. And even Joe McCullough, who's a pretty Lord of the Rings line fantasy writer, him bringing in Mythos into Rangers of Shadow Deep, and he's like a huge H.P. Lovecraft guy. Like he knows all that stuff really well. So watching the detail he was bringing into that and having it cross into multiple worlds, that's a pretty interesting idea for the work that he does.
Absolutely.
So I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the stuff that is in Blaster is all like pretty big stuff. Like there's a whole patch that you can apply to Last Days to make it like Old West Last Days. Yeah, which is just the coolest thing, and I've been begging one of my friends to make an Old West world so we can play Old West Last Days.
I want to so bad.
Absolutely.
It's like the Black Scorpion miniature, like in the magazine, and like I have a bunch of them. I was like, I gotta convert these guys and get blood splatters all over them. Yeah, cool. Apocalypse patched up jackets and stuff. Like, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I don't know, they all just feel like such, it's so organic, because it literally feels like these game designers who have designed these full-fledged games are now just sharing with their fans and the readers of Blaster their own homebrews. And that's what's so cool about it, is because, when you're with your gaming friends, the homebrew rules you usually come up with are crazy wild. And so that's what it just feels like, which is so cool.
Yeah, and we think, we've talked about it a lot, like internally, that basically that homebrew, like some people don't get that, like some people don't understand homebrew, and they don't understand the freedom and license around that. So it's really cool to give and equip them with in-world content that is like, you have permission from Joey Maguire to take your TNT model and blast it across the room because it encountered an anomaly in Site X, which is in the next volume. So like, I love it. They might not have come up with that, and it's cool, and like that's in the world. It's an what do you call that? Canon. It's okay to do this. Like for the people that need it to be okay, and need the official miniature, it's okay, and there's official miniatures.
Absolutely, it's almost like the unearthed arcana of the indie wargaming world.
Exactly.
So working with all these guys, we know every nerdy D&D group has some inside jokes. What's the best Blaster team inside joke?
I think we might need to circle back to this one. I need to think through this one. I was like, oh yeah, there's plenty, and then now I'm like looking on it.
I can only imagine with the personalities in the room. It's the truth. I mean, you touched on it a little bit. As far as Blaster 1, 2, fantastic, full of great content. Received very well. What can you tell us, if anything, is in store for us for Volume 3?
Yes. So I'm wrapping volume 3 right now. I had a last round of edits this weekend, so we're looking at it like being done this week for sure.
Nice.
Like,
Awesome.
oh God. As soon as I say it, it's like adds another
Right?
few days every time.
Asterisk.
I swore to myself I would never become the Kickstarter guy who's like, oh no, I know I've been completely quiet all this time. Sorry, but I'm gonna have to push it another 7 months. Like that's who I've become now. Which
It is
great.
what it is.
Yeah.
No, we're slowing down a little bit for Blaster 3, and you guys will understand because it's like we're putting a huge 50+ page war game in there called Sludge. That is the brainchild of Sean Sutter, and basically it's like a Black Powder plus dark fantasy world where like the wages of war, like the cost of war has corrupted men, and it has destroyed the planets that they live on, or the world that they live in, and it started to like break apart, and the very roots of the great tree are now exposed because the blood has just been like
That's
ruining.
so cool.
It's like basically it's the world has been threshed by war into like a sludge, and so it gives you freedom to build these really interesting armies with hussars with alternate heads, or like line infantry troops from say Perry Miniatures, and then putting knights next to them. So you have line infantry Napoleonics next to knights.
Cool.
And Sean has a whole world that he's developed around it, and he threads a little bit of that like little teasers through, like flavor text. But this is the game. So if you want to get the game, this is the way to do it. Blaster Volume 3. There's also some other just amazing gems in here that can't be missed. We've got Gasland's Legacy. So that's going to be a legacy rule set for Gaslands. It's got a punk rock aesthetic.
Nice.
Basically, it's post-apocalypse, right? Apocalypse. Okay. What I can say about it is that Mars calls Earth, and over like loud voice speakers says, we're done. We've foreclosed on Earth. Production's off. You guys have this much time to get to a vehicle and get out. And chaos just ensues from there. And you play with ridiculously automatically generated builds.
That's awesome.
You don't like nitpick and like power game. Like you get a crazy build. Like it's auto generated. Cool. I got like a golf cart basically with an explosive battering ram.
That's awesome. Get to Mars. Exactly.
So, and then the things that happen in that game, like by the end of chapter 5 of that little segment is just like absolutely, it's big. It's big. But after chapter 5, you're like, this is insane. It continually unravels an already unraveling world. And
That's
then
so cool.
What else have we got? We've got some really interesting stuff in This Is Not a Test. Joey creates this place called Site X that has anomalies in it that basically you build up clues, playing scenarios, and when you finally get the clues, you find like that one spot in Site X that has the artifacts and the anomalies floating around in it, and you flip basically using your skills, you're flipping over cards to see, am I going to get the anomaly or am I going to get the artifact? And the anomalies are like there's like one where it just shreds you into gore and you die. There's one where it's like it launches you across the board, and if you hit a wall, you take damage.
That's awesome.
So it's really fun, interesting anomaly. Kind of what is that video game where you go underground and it's like all
Metro.
Yes, exactly.
I love that game. Sold. I'm sold immediately.
Yeah. And his games are really smooth and interesting how he's built This Is Not a Test. So this is a really cool add-on to that game. Like I was reading through it, like I gotta build my This Is Not a Test stuff. And then Ash created a supplement to Gamma Wolves, which is his cool mech combat game it's kind of like a mech skirmish game actually, and you collect and fight over resources on post-apocalyptic Earth, and you're trying to like what we did was we wanted to focus more on the pilots themselves. A lot of times in these games you focus on the mechs,
Mm-hmm.
but like slowing down and looking at that pilot and what kind of characteristics the pilot gains over time. And we're starting with Ronin, so the mercenary companies, what kind of path do those choose? So you can choose, melee or hunter or guardian, and they have different basically experience paths for them to gain stuff.
That's awesome.
And I know I'm kind of going on, there's a lot in it, but there's also Shadowgrave. So we've got Shadowgrave is an expanded rule set for Frostgrave, Rangers of Shadowdeep, and Frostgrave Archipelago. And it brings the Mythos world into those games. And
That's so cool.
if you pick up either Blaster Volume 2 or 3, you'll have kind of enough to do those rules. I don't think that they're super interlocked, like you have to have both.
Mhm.
But Blaster Volume 3 focuses on magic. So
Ooh.
how do those magic users in those worlds of Frostgrave, how does magic work with Mythos? So, you shed a piece of your soul. There's always like a kind of balance of, do I even want to use this magic? Like, is it going to kill me? Is it going to kill the universe? What?
I'm so tough.
Exactly. And in both articles, he's done a really good job crafting scenarios in those worlds where it feels like you're getting into the Lovecraftian horror stuff. It's not just like this monster is now in the Frostgrave world. It's like
Those I keep Dark Young close at hand. I'm very excited.
Oh yeah, very nice. You only painted him halfway?
Yeah, for some reason it's just I only got to the top. I don't know. I was considering chopping him off and having like a pit monster, but now I'm like, well, now I need the goat legs, so we'll rethink that one.
Goat legs are coming back. We're gonna blend some brown in. It's gonna be great.
Pulling back from Blaster a little bit, because we could talk about Blaster for like 100 hours, I'm sure, but we understand that you recently quit your job of 8 years to start a completely new project, which we want to hear all about.
Yeah, so I started my own studio, and the purpose around this is to offer the services that I've been giving the team at Blaster to the world at large. So interacting with independent game designers, interacting with smaller studios or even medium or large studios that need a little extra hands on deck, or some big vision thinking around anything from production, design, brand, website, all of those things. I'm here for it. If you're a gaming podcast and you want to do a logo or think through what does 5 years look like, or those sorts of things, I want to bring what I've learned in advertising for almost a decade and bring it to support indie games, because that is something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I didn't think, to be honest with you, I didn't think that it'd be valuable. Based on the indie games that I've seen in the past, I was like, maybe they don't care. Maybe the game just needs to be like a Word document with a couple pictures dropped in, and that's okay. And that would be fine with me. But when we did Blaster and the response we got, I was like, okay, this is valuable. I can't believe it. And the response has been from other indie designers, like a desire for pushing past the do-it-yourself into a collaborative world where we're working together to create something really awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and that'll be so cool, because that'll involve you with even more indie game designers, which is so fun.
Yeah,
that you're gonna be in the ground level of what they're developing, and that's a really cool idea. And I think that's the perfect time, really, because with the advent, indie video games have done so very well in recent history that I think that there's much more of an appetite nowadays, especially for, just like we kind of said before, it's like there's just a feeling that comes with that, comfortability of like a homebrew, or just an idea that definitely, is a little bit more out in left field, and it's something you don't see as often, and that's actually very cool.
Yeah, I think there's becoming this demand for it, and it's mirroring the video game world, just like Kevin said. Like, there's AAA war games, like, Warhammer and Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and those are super polished things. But sometimes you want something that somebody like carved out of wood in their basement, and that's what I feel like
The Etsy of games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people want that personal touch. And this renaissance of indie video game or indie war games is awesome, because people are all of a sudden getting something that just one dude slaved over for 100 hours in his basement, and is like perfectly unique and like all about that person's vision. And it's just cool that that's getting a space now.
Yeah, and I feel like as the technology and the barrier to entry continues to drop, and the technology and access increases, there's like, when I was trying to name my company, I couldn't name it anything. Like,
Yeah.
I'm still not, like, my name I'm not sharing because I'm still like having it vetted, by the legal team. It's like every single person who's interested in this hobby has a game and has a vision and has these different things. And so we've got these thousands and thousands of small game studios emerging and emerging and emerging as the barrier to entry goes down, right? So they start going, the quantity of competition is escalating beyond exponentially. The amount of games produced each year just keeps skyrocketing. So if you want to put your vision out there, if you want to have a good game, if you want to, get something that hits that new baseline, the indie game baseline on Steam is now extremely high. Like, there's almost no discernible difference between a AAA game and a non-AAA indie game, other than maybe like a design choice to scale back graphics. But even then, there's an aesthetic consideration that is still AAA level.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my thought is, like, guys like Sean Sutter, I want in his seat sculpting. Like, I want you sculpting and drawing cards. I don't want you packing boxes. Like, while it's extremely amazing that Sean is a one-man show, that all of these guys are one-man shows, getting them to do what they do more is better for everyone. So I think helping with that, taking that barrier to entry that's low and helping improve the quality and helping improve the execution is going to help people be able to stand out in such a crowded market.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's cool. It's something that I'm super excited to see what comes out of it in the future, because I've been loving, because I wasn't into indie war games really until Kevin turned me on to Osprey games.
Yes.
Because he showed up one day with what was it, Last Days? Like you and our friend Jake were.
Well, I think first it was Gaslands. It's really funny how
Gaslands.
we have organically found ourselves fans of you guys' group, because it's like I think I had started watching battle reports produced by Ash, and I saw Gaslands for the first time, and so that's how I saw Mike's work. And then independently we were like, oh, this guy also makes this sweet game called Last Days, and I had already written like my own version of Necromundo years ago that was like 5 times the size of the original game. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's very similar to that. And you start to see that familiarity, like you said. It's like every wargamer, I feel like, in the back of their head, slowly designs their own, like, oh, this is a sweet game, but I really wish there was sailboats. You know what I mean? Whatever, there's always something that someone wants to add, hovercrafts, whatever. And then we find and then it was like one of our fans turned us on to Sean's work, and so we just found ourselves all of a sudden like, oh wait, Blaster Magazine was made specifically for people like us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think as that barrier goes down, you're gonna have more cool games out there. Like right now, I think we're at the cresting point where it's just like, or what do you call it? Maybe like the piercing point where it's finally getting through the challenge to create those. And one of the key things is 3D models. Oh, we'll talk about that later. I've got it.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, but going on to that, I mean, Sergey had said, you you were in this position for 8 years, it has to be so fun to now be gearing yourself towards working with these kinds of individuals. But what was it like taking that plunge? I mean, it's everybody's, dream to be able to quit their job and do what they want to do.
Yes. It depends on who you ask. If you ask my family, it's one thing. No, everybody's been super supportive. People ask me all the time in my personal interactions, like, how'd you do that? And honestly, I feel like we're scared out of doing things that we love. Not,
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's been fine. Like, it's been absolutely fine. I wake up, I'm happy. I go to work, I'm crushing through these things. In terms of the plunge, like taking the risk, there's lots of people out there who want to help you if you're willing to accept help. There are lots of programs, even in your governments, whatever world government you're a part of. I'm sure there's something that's trying to help encourage people to take those steps. And basically, thank goodness I did it, because I was already so far behind that I'm still catching up now. So I've had 3 or 4 weeks basically where I'm full-time for myself, and it's been like behind the 8 ball that whole time. So thank goodness I did, because I would have had my head explode if I was doing this and another job.
Yeah.
But that transition's been totally fine. And I think that I want to encourage anyone listening who wants to create some work and wants to create that next game and has something that they're sitting on, not to be afraid. Like, reach out, find some people that are supportive. For me, it was the team at Blaster, and recognize that your voice is totally valid. And I think especially I want to see war games from people other than white men. So if you're in that category, please reach out to me. I'd love to support you in taking the next step and making a game. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Obviously, you're already working on this new project. Is there anything upcoming that you're allowed to even mention a little bit of, so we can kind of know the types of projects that you're working on?
I don't think so. I mean, I can tell you in general that I've been working on game books. I do have projects that I'm working on. They're kind of in their early stages, and I'm not 100% clear what I can speak to, so I don't want to jeopardize
Totally
that.
fine. Totally fine.
Yeah, it's totally.
But I gotta tell you, like, it is something else. Like, I always loved that about working at a creative agency. It'd be like, I worked for this medical device company, and by the time we were seeing it, it was like 3 years before release. Like, we were planning the marketing release 3 years before it came out and was legal in that state to use it, the country to use it. And it was so cool to be on the front lines of that and see like what kind of stuff was going to happen in the future, essentially.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, you see what's in the pipeline, you get a sense of what next year's games are going to be like. It's definitely a privilege. We have some really cool stuff coming out. I think what I will say is that Black Site Studios has an incredible lineup of skirmish games, indie skirmish games that are supported by terrain. They're supported by well play-tested rule sets. They're supported by beautiful 3D miniatures, if you haven't seen them. So I think that is definitely something up and coming that you should check out.
Awesome. We will definitely do that.
Absolutely. If it involves small miniature soldiers of any sort, we will be there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the Black Site team is slowly draining me of every single paycheck I've ever received.
Yeah,
these things happen.
I think that's the other split, is that now it's like I have a company and like our business is games. So like my tax returns are games. This is all the game. It's all gaming research, like.
It's fantastic.
Yep. So did you want to circle back around to the inside joke question?
I was going to say to the inside joke question, there's a couple of kind of angles you could go with. You could go with Joseph McCullough basically being very, like, he hasn't played a video game. I think that'd be something fun to share, is that, we're talking about different games and how they compare to other video games and, how these tropes and stuff work. And I asked Joe if he had played something. I can't remember what I asked him if he played it, and he said, "Oh no, I just do minis." And I was like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, ever since I was a kid, I've just done minis only." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I just read Lord of the Rings and play miniatures games."
That's so funny. It's the truth though.
I was like-
Sergey, I have the same thing with Sergey. Sergey has never seen any movie, so I'm always like, Conan the original barbarian. He's just like, I've never seen it. I'm like, how have you never seen these movies?
Yeah, you need to see some movies, Sergey. What's going on?
right?
Like when we were all on quarantine, Kevin gave me like a list of like
It was
80s movies.
RoboCop,
Like, good.
The Predator, Aliens. I was like, you don't even understand all my references. You need to get the pictures here.
The bad thing is, I still have not seen RoboCop, Aliens, or The Predator.
Have you seen Terminator 1?
No.
Jesus.
I played too many video games as a kid. I have a deep knowledge of video games. I don't have a deep knowledge.
There you go.
of movies.
It's, at least it's several categories and not,
Exactly.
a lack in general. Now, Greg, it's been fantastic having you on. And for our final questions, the question that we ask every guest that we have on the Under the Tabletop is, what are you most excited for in the future of wargaming? And what do you hope will never change about the hobby?
What I'm excited about most is collaboration. Seeing collaboration, seeing companies that are very small groups of people coming together and working together, like I've seen happen in Blaster, and seeing the effect it's had even on these guys. I'm very excited to see other people take that model and go, look, this other guy's really good at combat systems and I'm really good at narrative. Like, I want to work with him and let's work together instead of, competing against each other. It's totally fine if you do it the other way, but having that extra collaboration makes better games for both of you. And so my hope is to see that grow as this, as technology makes it easier for us to produce games. My hope is that you'll collaborate with me if you've got a great game, so that I can focus on all the stuff that I'm really passionate about, so that you can focus on writing your next game. That's what I'm excited about seeing, is more and more creatives coming together to collaborate on this work, so that the end result for the indie game is almost as indiscernible from the AAA game. And
Absolutely.
the only difference is scale, the amount of it that's been created. And the other thing I wanted to tie in there too is following female painters on Instagram has been super encouraging, and seeing more and more people pick up the hobby. I'm seeing a lot of Warhammer models, which is fantastic. Love Warhammer. Glad they're there, but I'd love to see way more female indie gamers. I'd love to see them come into this world, and I know that you're there. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm already here, you jerk. I get it. I'm stoked about it. And those are the two things that I'm really most excited about. The thing I wouldn't want to have change, I just blinked on it. I have one more thing I can talk about that I'm excited about. Can I share that instead?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So
all positivity.
So for me, one of the other really exciting things for the indie gaming community, in tabletop gaming and in wargaming, is 3D models. Okay, so I think we're at that stage where, if I could compare it to your cell phone use, you got your first cell phone and you bought a free app and the game's okay, and you're kind of like, that's fine. I shouldn't have to pay for games. Like, these are good, but they're not like stellar. Till now, when you're like, I could play Gwent and it's a fantastic game, and I am totally cool putting $15 into it. Like, I don't even care. That is the stage of 3D models that we're getting to. So 3D models are becoming absolutely fantastic and interesting. They're bound by no game. They're just, creators are creating them based solely on their imaginations, what they want. If you're an indie game creator, this means that you can create games without having to worry about the production limitation of miniatures. And so everyone who's an indie gamer should be thinking of this as an opportunity to create their games and to create really weird original games that are not bound by simply saying, oh, I've got a bunch of elves, maybe I'll do like an elf-like skirmish game. You can go totally ape and do something really weird about like Mesopotamian horse archers or whatever you want, because there's a mini now for it. And we are becoming, as a community, more and more 3D printing capable. We're getting it, you know? So yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm also most excited about, is just that production like barrier continuing to drop.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that's actually one of my favorite things going on right now. And because when it was Frostgrave was the first one that I personally ran into, and I was like, wait a second, it's miniature agnostic. And I remember I literally looked at my closet because I knew that I have like 3 or 4 Warhammer Fantasy armies that I have not touched in years, and being able to crack those open and like looking at it and be like, oh my god, I love these dwarves. Like I have not been able to play a game with them in forever, and knowing that there's all these games that are now coming out where it's, you know, like you said, it's just, you know, whatever miniatures you would like, or if it, you know, it might be a game where you specifically need dwarves, or it might just be, you know, fantasy adventures, but either way, it gives so much more life to your collection. And I would say the advantage to that too is that it, you know, it helps the fans of these games too, because it's not this huge, you know, commitment that they have to make of funds to have like, you know, like the official miniatures or whatever, you know, the time consumption that it takes to set up an entire new batch of miniatures. Like you can grab your stuff, you know, if you have a barbarian that you've loved to play in D&D this for years and years, now you can throw it into this game and use it just the same.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's really increased like the specificity of like crazy models that are out there too. Like I said, Kevin and I have been preparing to have a very elaborate Frostgrave setup for our channel, and we went like absolutely ham making crazy warbands, and I chose to do goblins. And like in Warhammer, like I used a bunch of Warhammer models obviously because I love night goblins, but they don't have everything. Like there's no like goblin knight. But I found a Goblin Knight because some dude named Zoltoidub, shout out to Zoltoidub, he's a great sculptor by the way, in Eastern Europe produces just a hand sculpted Goblin Knight, and it's incredible. And it's just really cool to be able to, you know, go through all these weird things that people just like pulled out of their heads and placed on the internet for you to purchase, and you can just get anything you want now. It's awesome.
And you get to support a bunch of different people. You get to support an indie game developer. You get to support a you know, independent sculptor, and that's just, I don't know, that just speaks to my heart.
Yeah, totally. And I think that pulling back on the bounds, like the boundary lines, means that you can do weird stuff. Like Mike Hutchinson can have a dream like, hey, what about a Magic Carpet aerial combat game? I'm thinking to myself, what are the, you know, minis for that, dude? Like that doesn't exist. And then going to a 3D print STL website, and you're just like seeing these awesome sorceress genies like floating around magic carpets and ripping Middle Eastern style things. Like where would those have? Why do those exist? Hey, why do those exist? And thank you, sculptors. And be like, now that just totally unleashed a game onto the world that didn't have to exist because somebody created this mini already.
So if you want to look at any of the work that Greg has done, we're going to have links in the description below. We're going to have links to all of the issues of Blaster, and we'll probably have links to Greg's new project, which we're super excited to have out there.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it was a pleasure having you on, Greg. Thank you so much. Now, if you, the viewers, enjoyed this video, you can help support it and our channel by feeding the algorithm that controls our very existence by simply liking, commenting on the video, sharing it with someone who you think might enjoy it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? We'd love to have you. You should subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you can see whenever new content is produced. And, the description below. It's gonna be somewhere.
Well, this is my first time YouTube. Am I doing it right?
You're doing fantastic. Now, if you want to support the channel in the best way possible, you should consider joining our Patreon campaign. It is the pledges of our patron that help support this channel and Sergey and I's dream in doing this full time at some point. But either way, once again, Greg, it was fantastic having you on. thank you everybody for viewing. And as always, Sergey and I will see you on the tabletop.